Evil Empire is a company whose work I have loved in Dead Cells. Using the knowledge gained over the years, they are releasing The Rogue Prince of Persia, a game that exists because of a chance encounter at an industry event, and it's really damned fun. Coming to early access on Steam, I played for roughly a dozen hours or so, and I see a package that's a little light on content, but is extremely solid at its core. So let's get into it in this review in progress of The Rogue Prince of Persia. You are the Prince of Persia, a purple-hued man whose city is besieged by the Huns. Using their dark, shamanistic magic, they've conquered your city, and you'll awaken 3 days later in a camp hidden in an oasis. The prince has himself a bolo that protects him at the time of his death, sending him back to the last safe place he was in, which is this camp. And this is how the game's roguelike mechanic is explained through its lore. You will run, jump, wall run, and slice away through level after level, trying to get stronger, open up extra paths, and discover a way to defeat your enemies once and for all. As it is an early access launch, several things are missing for now. The procedurally generated tile set is light on variation, and after a dozen or so runs, I felt like I knew the pattern of it far better than I did with Dead Cells. But that game has had well over 20 major content updates, so I'm happy to let Evil Empire cook and see where this tale goes as they take user feedback over time. The game features an interesting mechanic for figuring out what happened, when, and where you'll need to go next. As you discover more things, it offers up new paths to take, similar to Dead Cells. Fluid parkour-style movement is the name of this game. It uses a simplistic, colorful graphics on a 2D plane, and you'll mix running, jumping, dodging, and awesome wall running in a dance that feels fantastic. The prince is an incredible acrobat, more akin to a Simone Biles than your typical video game ruffian. Whenever there is a wall behind your character, you can hold the left trigger to wall run for a short distance. Once you've reached your limit, you can either jump off the wall or slowly slide down. Mixing jumping into wall runs, then ping-ponging off other walls, which you then run up and climb a ledge, feels freaking great. Combat itself is a mix of melee weapons on the X button, with Y being a forceful kick, and the right bumper activates your ranged ability. Ranged moves use up energy, which is gained by hitting people with melee, and it's a fun, albeit simplistic system. B is a rather powerful dodge, which sees you vault over enemies to avoid their attacks, and A, of course, is for jumping. To assist you in combat, there is a small number of weapons available at the launch of Early Access, and while a few can drop right away, most will need to be unlocked via the game's meta progression system. As you progress through runs, you'll gain a temporary currency. These little purple wisps of smoke need to be deposited in a big purple glowing brazier that lines each level, or else they'll be lost if your health reaches 0. Similar mechanic to Dead Cells if you played that one, where you needed to spend the cells at various merchants, or else they too would be lost at death. In between each run back at camp, you can spend that currency you saved up to unlock more weapons or mods. These mods can drop in run, and you can equip them up to 4 at a time. They offer various passive abilities like shooting fireballs when you kick, or dropping poison on the ground when you do a ground pound attack by holding down and pressing A when you're high enough in the air. There are more to be found, and you can bet your sweet bippy that the devs will be adding and changing things up a lot during the early access period and beyond. The Rogue Prince of Persia is an interesting looking title. It's extremely simplistic and brightly colored. It kinda turned me off a little at first. There's a cutscene that they showed us during a preview event where everything had more detail, but the game itself relies on sharp black lines to pull off an almost cel-shaded look. Humans have really colorful skin tones, and enemies are all manner of creatures. I ended up really loving the way it looks, and it averaged roughly 400 or so FPS on my PC, so I'm gonna guess that consoles and handhelds are gonna be able to handle this game with aplomb. For the audio, the game has no voice acting, though there is a lot of rather basic text interactions. Writing's fine, though it's pretty limited in its scope. Most conversations right now are just a few lines back and forth early on, and it's another area where I think over time the team will need to add a lot more. Outside of the movement, my favorite part of the game is its soundtrack. The opening screen has a surprisingly catchy pop song, and each level has an excellent mix of classic and modern sounds. The first stage, for instance, has a classic Middle Eastern twang meets hip-hop feel that's hard to describe, but it kicks serious ass. Every level has music that feels appropriate for its look, and the boss fights go all out. I haven't run into any major bugs, which is always really nice in a game in early access, and everything seemingly works like it's supposed to. Though with the lack of overall content in comparison to something like Hades 2, I would hope that that's the case. Wrapping things up, the Rogue Prince of Persia's early access launch is a solid one. While there is a decided lack of content, the core gameplay is fantastic, and I cannot wait to see what this one turns into by version 1.0.